Myles O'Reilly. I'm from Limerick, Ireland. I live in Dublin. And I'm a Roman Catholic priest, Jesuit order. And so I was brought up in the Ignatian spirituality tradition. And I live in Gonzaga community, and that's where I meet people for spiritual companionship, which I call it. Well, the old word was spiritual direction, and it gave the impression, that you were directing the other person. But of course, you're not directing the other person at all. It's the Holy Spirit that's guiding the person, and all you're doing is listening to the other person's story and trying to hear how the Spirit is guiding the person in their lives, in and through all their life experience. So it's more appropriate maybe that you're a companion, you're facilitating, you're listening, and you're helping the other person to explore and hear how are they being guided by the Spirit. The deepest core of us all is the capacity to love, and helping to bring forth that capacity in our lives. First of all, to grasp that we are unconditionally loved, and to be healed of all the false programming we have in ourselves, thinking that we can only be loved if we fulfill this condition or that condition. But just to realise that we're loved unconditionally, and that's a huge start. I mean, most people could spend their whole lives doing that alone. But once you even grasp that to some extent and heal yourselves of all the false programming, I think then you get into a place of wanting to share this with others and want to bring that good news to other people, and their lives become very transformed. And I think the love always expands your heart bigger and bigger to include everybody as your brother and sister, and you're interrelated with everything in the world. Well, it'd always take people where they're at, you'd always start from you can always start from where you are. And when you really listen to people and have good rapport, and I think people find good listening very attractive. It's a very unusual thing to be really listened to for your own sake. And you're not a means to anything. You're not trying to sell anything or buy something, or you're just treating a person as a sacred person in their own right, and trying to hear how are they being led. I think that's very attractive to people. I think that when we don't accept ourselves, and we tend to project it onto others, or we don't accept in ourselves, whereas when we accept whatever is unacceptable in ourselves, we don't project it on others, we're more peaceful people then as a result. I think, again, if you're facilitating love, love is outgoing. It's gifting the world with yourself, what's best in you. And that's what gives you greatest pleasure, is you can be more fully yourself when you're giving. Ignatius was the founder of the Jesuits, a layman for many years. He was a soldier, and he was hit by a cannonball in a battle. And during his recovery, he was very bored, and he asked, could he read some novels? And he loved to be able to impress people, with his feats of chivalry and that. So when there were no books available to him, he was given Lives of the Saints and the Life of Christ. And as he read those, he began to imagine, what if I lived a life like St. Francis or St. Dominic? And he began to imagine himself being a great saint. And he used to get a great kind of sense of peace and joy at being that in his life. And then he used to go back to his old fantasies and think of himself being a great chivalrous figure, and performing great feats that attracted attention to himself. And he had great joy in that thought as well. But it used to fade away and leave him empty and dry at the end of the day. But he noticed when he proposed to himself living a life of a saint, that it didn't fade away, and he began to say to himself, isn't that strange, that one desire remains and persists in me, and the other just disappears and leaves me empty. And that was the first time he began to realise that God was acting in his desires, and that's set him off on his journey. So I'm in that tradition of Ignatius, watching your own experience and see how is God guiding you in through your desires. We're going into a new era in the world, where we were brought up in a religious tradition, and we identified with that religious tradition. Similarly, even with our own nation, we over-identify our own nation. And we tend to see anyone outside that tradition as them, or the other, or whatever. But now I think that our own religious tradition is meant to bring us into a deep place beyond that tradition, really, a deeper place than it, in a way that you see that your tradition is really only an expression of God. It's a certain unique manifestation of God. But there's many other rich manifestations as well, and we're beginning now to celebrate the other manifestations, learn from them, and be enriched by them, and have a much richer tradition in ourselves. So instead of seeing your tradition as a kind of an end in itself, it's meant to bring you into that deep place beyond that tradition, and then see the tradition as an expression of that mystery. I think that God incarnates in everybody, and Jesus lived in the 1st century, and Ignatius in the 16th century. I live in the 21st century now. But God guides us in our own circumstances, in our own time, and in our own culture, and addressing the issues of our own day. And so that's how the Spirit acts in us, addresses us to the issues of today.